So much, Liang. If we can go to the next slide, please, Alex. Thank you. So, as we know, Metro Vancouver and New Westminster are in the midst of an affordable housing crisis. And according to the city's housing needs report, more than 200 new affordable units are needed each year from now until 2031. Currently, many affordable housing projects do require a rezoning application. This can be quite challenging, especially for the affordable housing providers, due to the funding commitments, especially if funding comes from more senior levels of government, such as BC Housing or the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, as well as the rezoning process itself. Next slide, please. And so what is the focus of this initiative? So the focus of this initiative is on the affordable or non-market rental housing. And if you look at this visual that represents the housing continuum, it is this middle piece that we are currently focused on, which consists of non-market rental housing and below market rental housing. So we're not exploring initiatives to streamline, ownership tenure housing or supportive or transitional housing. I would also like to note that for more information, frequently asked questions, and opportunities for input, feel free to go on the Cities Be Heard webpage, which my colleague Alex just put in the chat. And any questions or comments will be answered within 5 business days. Um, yeah, if we can head to the next slide, please, Alex. Thank you. So what is being proposed? Um, so New Westminster is currently exploring the opportunity to pre-zone areas for affordable housing to address the aforementioned housing affordability crisis. The focus is on wood frame construction up to 6 stories, where the building is owned and operated by a nonprofit housing providers. The units are rental only, so there's no ownership component. There is other criteria that needs to be met, such as entering into a legal agreement that would secure affordability for a long period of time. And it is also focused on areas of higher density already identified in the city's official community plan. Future project phases may look at expanding the pre-zoning initiatives, either to other areas or for other scales of development. Um, yeah, next slide, please, Alex. So as a part of this initiative, we have conducted interviews with other peer municipalities. Next slide, please. And we have we have had conversations with municipal planners from the District of Saanich, City of Victoria, and District of Squamish. These municipalities were chosen because similar pre-zoning initiatives were already conducted in these municipalities. And some of the key insights have been categorized, and they include, the elimination of the need for rezoning really helps us speed up the approvals process. And it is focused on enabling all types of nonprofit affordable housing, including co-op housing. In these municipalities, the areas that are identified as suitable for pre-zoning are aligned with areas that are designated or identified for residential growth in those municipalities' official community plans. And in all of these municipalities, affordability is secured through a type of a legal agreement that secures, again, affordability over a long period of time. Most often, that period is 60 years. Next slide, please, Alex. And at this point, I would like to invite my colleague James to speak about the proposed zoning district framework.
All right, thanks so much, Dorian. My name is James Klukas, and I'm also a community planner with Urban Systems. As Dorian mentioned, this initiative is focused on pre-zoning areas of the city for affordable housing. So I'm going to move into a little bit of a discussion on like the mechanics of what's being proposed and what the zoning district framework would look like. In other words, like just an overview of the bylaw amendment that would be proposed to the city's current zoning bylaw. So the first thing that would be done would be to create like a new term in the zoning bylaw called an affordable housing development. And through this piece of the amendment, we would be defining specifically the type of project that would be eligible to be pre-zoned. And again, that means that it would have like an expedited approvals process. There would be as of right zoning in place, and they would be coming forward to the city for like a development permit and building permit to move forward with their application for an affordable housing project. So again, we're talking about a rental or co-op housing development. This initiative does not involve any pre-zoning, as Dorian mentioned, for strata ownership housing or supportive housing. Again, this is focused on affordable rental or co-op housing developments. They would need to be owned by a nonprofit organization, a government agency. That could be something like the Metro Vancouver Housing Corporation, just to give one example, or a co-op. And there would also be a need for a legal agreement securing affordability for a minimum period of 60 years. At least that's what we're proposing at this point. Generally speaking, that would be a housing agreement that would need to be approved by New Westminster Council as well. So they would still have a role as well in many of these projects. And then as well, in addition to the housing component, there may be opportunities for compatible accessory uses, such as childcare, to give one example. And that's something that we'd like to talk about with you more as we go this evening. Next slide, please. So in terms of the geographies, what we're looking at in this phase of the project is that we would pre-zone areas that are already identified for 6-story housing. So we're looking at like the multiple dwelling or RM districts that are currently in New Westminster's official community plan, not including Queensborough. So we're specifically focused on the mainland. And we're also not proposing to include areas that within 200 meters of SkyTrain station at this point, recognizing that generally speaking, higher densities are proposed in most of those spots. So again, what you see on this map in red here, those are the areas that are potentially eligible for this initiative in this first phase. Again, those red areas are the multiple dwelling districts in the current official community plan for New Westminster. There may be future phases that could expand the criteria to other sites, like for example, there are mixed use areas. We're also looking at how to deal with these transit-oriented areas in more detail as well, but recognize that the city will be updating its official community plan in the coming months within 2025. And so there are further opportunities to potentially expand this initiative at that point in time as well. So again, this first phase will focus on those multiple dwelling areas that are already identified in the community plan for essentially 6-story residential development. So the draft zoning district regulations, they'll also include topics such as permitted uses, density, site coverage, setbacks, parking, and loading requirements. These are the types of things that you'd see typically regulated in a zoning bylaw. And we've got a little bit of an overview of each of these topics on the subsequent slides. So moving on to the next one, just in terms of permitted uses, we've already talked about the definition of affordable housing development and what that would entail. As mentioned, there is the potential for complementary uses. Small scale commercial, that would probably be most likely in like future phases as we think about like mixed use and commercial areas where this might be appropriate. But there is the possibility for some of that. But certainly within residential areas, there is possibility for other accessory uses such as like childcare facilities or personal services or home-based businesses that would be a bit more common in areas that have primarily like residential development. So again, that's a conversation point as well that we have for you as we move to the discussion later on, just in terms of what types of uses might make sense for the city to permit as part of these developments. The next slide focuses on density. So this phase of work would focus on the six-story form. So the pre-zoning would allow nonprofit or affordable housing developments of up to 6 stories. Um, and anything beyond that would need to go through a formal rezoning process. Uh, Zoning bylaws also deal with density limits through what's called a floor space ratio. And that's like a measure of density that involves dividing the gross floor area of a building by the total lot area. So the recommended floor space ratio for this zone is 2.75. And that's like a fairly common figure for like a 6-story residential zone. It's meant to reflect density levels that are similar to what the city's seen with recent affordable housing developments, but also to provide enough flexibility to housing providers to come forward with projects that are economically viable and that'll work within this pre-zoning framework without the need to come forward with like another formal rezoning application to the city, which involves extensive process. Next slide, please. Then just getting into the nitty gritty of the zone here as well. Zoning regulations often cover other topics such as site coverage and setbacks. So the proposed site coverage in areas that would be pre-zoned for affordable housing is a maximum of 60% of the site used for the building, with the remainder used for things like open space. And then we would also have proposed setbacks, and you see those listed here, like 4.5 meters from the front lot line and so on. So again, these are sort of baselines. There are the opportunities for projects to come by or come forward on a site-specific basis and propose variances that the city could consider if any of these don't quite work in a site-specific context. But these are baseline regulations that we're looking at putting forward in the zone. And then lastly, we also have parking. And so parking and loading will be provided in accordance with the parking and loading regulations of the city's zoning bylaw. At this time, New Westminster already has unique specific minimum parking requirements for secured rental units. And so those parking rates are a little bit lower than the rates you would see, say, for like a market like ownership project. And we're still exploring appropriate parking and loading requirements. I think the baseline would be use the secured rental unit minimums, but there would be the possibility of introducing lower minimum rates for an affordable housing project as well. And that's something that's being reviewed. And so that's just the quick overview of the basic zoning framework that is being proposed as part of this initiative. And there's the opportunity to provide questions in the tool that's available on Zoom. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Melissa to facilitate that component of the discussion.
Thanks, James. Yeah, so if you scroll your cursor towards the bottom of your screen, you'll see your menu bar will pop up, and there's an icon for questions and answers, and we encourage you to use that tool to pose any questions you may have about the presentation that you just heard.